Westside Jeff sitting in for Chris Crock tonight on News Talk 820 WBAP and now on FM at 93.3. Story is simple. I just give you common sense opinion on current events. I follow the news, watch it, listen to it across multiple assets, and really find myself having an opinion and after analyzing it, and that gives me a chance to sit here and share it with you. Two big stories that I'm following tonight that come into play. The second one is what the state of Alabama did today with regard to abortion. We'll talk about that in about 14 minutes. But first, I want to hit the big local story. There's a story that went down on Monday morning that I've been following all along, and it sticks out to me for a bunch of reasons. The story was it occurred on the east side of Dallas at the Pioneer Technology and Arts Academy on the east side of Dallas. Law enforcement was called to the school because a student, 16-year-old male student, had a gun, was in the administration's office. The administrators were keeping him cool, calm, collected while they called the police. Mesquite Police came in. 3 officers came in from Mesquite Police Department, and in that process, when the police came in, they were talking to the student and quote unquote negotiating, as the story says, for the student to put the gun down. And in the process, there was a shooting. And what we know from Monday, this was at 8:50 a.m. Monday morning, so 9 o'clock Monday morning right here in North Texas. And the story Monday that we heard by the time I went on the air at 8 o'clock was student with a gun in the office. Administrators kept him calm, cool, and collected, called the police. Mesquite Police came. The police went in. 3 officers went into the administration's offices, negotiating for the student to put the gun down. And in the process, shots were fired. The student was injured. The officers were not hit or injured. The student was taken to the hospital, and that's pretty much all we knew. And that was Monday. Yesterday, the news comes out, Tuesday. Dallas Morning News reports, Jamie Landers reports, as a follow-up to that story, that 19 shots had been fired. 19 shots fired, all 19 from 3 police officers. So that was the new news yesterday. And my opinion on that yesterday was pretty simple. Why do we fire 19 shots at a kid and a 16-year-old kid in a administrator's office? The kid gets injured, and as of still to this minute, we don't know if the kid was hit by bullets or shrapnel because it's not being reported. I have a problem with all this. My problem with this story is too much secrecy. Our country doesn't have the faith and belief and trust in systems today, and we as parents, as leaders in our community, have to do everything we can to make things visible while protecting a 16-year-old student's name and the officers. I have no problem with that. But we can't cover up the events of the day. We have to release them. If you're going to call the police, if you're going to make a story out of the fact someone has a gun, shots are fired in the police department, then we deserve the opportunity to know what happened. Again, yesterday, the news broke that 19 shots were fired by the police officers. And we don't know the conditions that caused 19 shots to be fired. So today, again, I'm checking going back and forth and watching the news and the Dallas Morning News. Thank you for the news, Dallas News, for actually staying on top of the story because I think it's an important story. The story Jamie files today says a 16-year-old student shot by police more than a dozen times after bringing a firearm into Mesquite School earlier this week was armed with a handgun. That's authorities telling the Dallas Morning News on that. It goes on to say officers were dispatched at 8:50 a.m. to Pioneer Technology and Arts Academy in the 3200 block of Oates Drive. Now, that's on the eastern edge of Dallas. And the student was in the school's office with a gun and was refusing to administrators to put it down. Officers tried to negotiate with the student to get him to drop the weapon, and when he did not comply, police said, the police reports, the spokespeople there say that 3 officers fired a total of 19 rounds. The student, this is the news today. The news today is the student did not fire any shots. Now, again, this is Wednesday. We are 24, 48, 12, I'm not good at math, 60 hours after this occurs. And all we know is 16-year-old gun in school, police are called, police go in, try to negotiate and get him to put the gun down. Shots were fired. We find out yesterday, 19 of them. We find out today that the student never fired his weapon. The student's leg was wounded, but police said it was unclear. This is today. This is as of today. Jamie reports. The student's leg was wounded, but police say it's unclear whether he was shot or hit by shrapnel. He was taken to the hospital and released Monday evening before being booked into Dallas County Juvenile Detention Center. No other injuries were reported, and police said all 19 shots were confined to the office located at the end of the hallway with no rooms behind it. Now, when asked about the officer's intentions in shooting at the student, the police department spokesman said Mesquite officers use deadly force to stop a threat of death or serious bodily harm and do not fire warning shots or shoot to injure or disarm. That's common sense. That's police work. You don't just pull out your weapon and shoot someone just to disarm somebody. It's you shoot your weapon in a case to stop a threat of death or serious bodily harm when felonies are being committed. Again, the story goes on today and says the department declined to provide any additional information about the circumstances that caused officers to fire, but said they plan to release more details, including 911 calls and body-worn camera footage early next week. Because of his age, the student's name's not been released. The names of the officers also have not been released. My problem is that last couple of sentences I shared. The department declined to provide any additional information about the circumstances that caused officers to fire. I have a problem with that. That is a major problem. I have a significant major problem with any law enforcement agency in this country declining to provide any additional details about a shooting where officers fire guns at somebody. What I want to know is this. What prompted police officers to fire their guns, 3 officers to fire their guns at a 16-year-old student? It's not about the 16-year-old. What prompts you to fire your guns at somebody? What was the threat? I'd like to see body footage camera. I'd like the reports. I want to know, was the student hit by a bullet? We still don't know that. You see, here's my thought on this whole story. It sucks. It just sucks. And what sucks about it is, first of all, that it happened. But what also sucks about it is, secondly, is too much secrecy. Secrecy is bad, especially in public office. The reason we, as citizens of this country, of this community here in North Texas, we don't trust a lot of things we hear, see, and get reported on is this: secrecy. A lack of visibility of what really happened and the facts makes us distrust law enforcement. We don't need that. I am a big believer and fan of law enforcement, but when law enforcement seems to cover things up, it seems like there's too much secrecy, and this bothers me because what it does is continue to preempt and continue to reinforce the theory that you can't trust law enforcement, and that's dead wrong. It's dead wrong for them to be so secret, and it's dead wrong for us not trust our institutions. That's a problem. That's my opinion. If you got a thought on that, my name is Jeff. It's Westside Jeff. My phone number is 800-288-9227, 800-288-WBAP. You can also hit me up on social media at Westside Jeff on Facebook, on X, on Instagram, or just dial 800-288-9227. My name's Jeff. It's Westside Jeff. And for Chris Kroc on News Talk 820 WBAP, and now on FM at 93.3. Westside Jeff in for Chris Kroc tonight, News Talk 820 WBAP, now on FM at 93.3. Again, the scenario going on in Mesquite really bothers me. And it bothers me because there's lack of visibility. And as a citizen of this community, visibility is everything. And especially at a time when we don't trust institutions, it's very important that institutions work very hard to regain that trust. When I say institutions, I'm talking about the national reporting media. I'm talking about political leaders, and I'm talking about local leaders, statewide leaders, and folks in Washington. I'm talking about educators. I'm talking about anyone with authority, because that is being questioned across our country right now. If you want to weigh in on that topic or any topics, again, you can hit me up across social media at Westside Jeff on Facebook, on X, on Instagram. Again, at Westside Jeff, or you can pick up the phone, dial 800-288-9227. Second big story today. This was a story not here in Texas, but in a neighboring, pretty close neighboring state, and that is a major decision from a state Supreme Court. A major Alabama health system is suspending in vitro fertilization treatments, that's IVF, days after the state's Supreme Court, so this is the Alabama State Supreme Court. They ruled on Friday, but it came out today. They ruled that frozen embryos qualify as children under state law. So the Alabama State Court said a frozen embryo is a child. This is going to be an interesting story to tackle for many, many nights and many, many days moving forward. A spokesman for the University of Alabama at Birmingham Hospital said, "We are saddened that this will impact our patients and our patients' attempt to have a baby through IVF. But we must evaluate the potential that our patients and our physicians could be prosecuted criminally or face punitive damages for following the standard of care for IVF treatments." Again, state Supreme Court in Alabama ruled that frozen embryos, are a baby. And by discarding those, that could be considered a homicide. Now, IVF, which accounts for an estimated about 2% of births in U.S., entails extracting eggs from a woman. You fertilize those eggs in a lab and transfer those embryos back into the woman's uterus. Now, embryos that aren't immediately transplanted are typically placed in cold storage to be preserved. It's very common. I've never been in a position where my wife and I could not conceive, but I know a lot of folks that have. And for those folks, this is a really tough ruling for them. The UAB spokesperson said all parts of the process through egg retrieval would continue, so they'll continue to do egg retrieval. But egg fertilization and embryo development at the University Health System's Division of Reproductive Endocrinology and Infertility was being paused right now while it assesses the ruling's legal implications. Now, UAB is the state's largest hospital and the 8th largest hospital in the United States. So when you have the 8th largest hospital in the United States make a move like this to say we are going to put a pause right now on fertilizing eggs, frozen embryos, and putting them back in the uterus, this is going to impact the 8th largest hospital in the country. When they do that, it's going to make others stand back and go, whoa, do we need to consider that? And again, they're doing that because they feel the litigious portion of our society, their medical providers, their team, the university health system could get sued. So it's about protecting from lawsuits because of this ruling. Now, the Alabama Supreme Court ruled Friday that frozen embryos can be considered children under the state's Wrongful Death of a Minor Act, enacted in 1872. Now, that allows parents to recover punitive damages in the event of a child's death. Again, that was a Wrongful Death of Minor Act enacted in 1872 and allows parents to recover punitive damages in the event of a child's death. Now, this case was brought, the case in Alabama to the Alabama Supreme Court was brought, and this is the interesting part of the story. I went, what? The case was brought by several couples whose embryos were destroyed when a patient dropped them on a floor in a fertility clinic's cold storage section by mistake. It was an error. They just dropped them accidentally, and bang. So the owners of those embryos sued. The lower court made a decision. It went back up to the Supreme Court in the state, and the state said, no, those are embryos or children. Now, the court said nothing in the Act's language stops it from being applied to frozen embryos. The ruling added that it isn't the court's role to make such an exception, especially considering a 2018 constitutional amendment that made it state policy to recognize and support the sanctity of unborn life and the rights of unborn children. Chief Justice Thomas Parker, again, Supreme Court Chief Justice in the state of Alabama, said, carving out an exception for the people in this case, small as they were, would be unacceptable to the people of the state, who have required us to treat every human being in accordance with the fear of a holy God who made them in his image. Now, the decision raised concerns about the future fertility treatments in the state. Justice Greg Cook wrote in dissenting opinion that the decision would likely force providers in Alabama to stop freezing embryos. Greg Cook said, no rational medical provider would continue to provide services for creating and maintaining frozen embryos, knowing that they must continue to maintain such frozen embryos forever or risk the penalty of a wrongful death act claim for punitive damages. This is an interesting topic, and it's an interesting topic from a lot of perspectives. My thought on this is this. The issue of abortion is alive and well across this country, and it's not going to go away. Ever since Roe v. Wade was struck down a year ago, this is a hot potato. No matter what your political affiliation is, no matter what your religious belief is, no matter what side of this issue you stand on. And I contend that this is an issue that people stand in the middle a lot, and I'll explain that after the bottom of the hour news. You've got to hit the news coming up in about 4 minutes. But abortion is and will continue to be a hot potato in 2024 and beyond. This isn't going to be settled this week, this month, this year. Alabama may have settled at this point, but something tells me it's going to be pushed up to the United States Supreme Court again. And it won't surprise me if the U.S. Supreme Court pushes it back down to the state and says, let the state decide. I'm a fan of that. I'm a fan of what they did, the Supreme Court, the U.S. Supreme Court with Roe v. Wade. This is a decision states need to make and the voters need to make, not politicians. You need to make this decision. I need to make this decision about abortion. Are we in favor? Are we against? And how do we define it? And that's the devil in the details we'll talk about in about 4 minutes. My name is Jeff. It's Westside Jeff, and for Chris Crock on News Talk 820 WBAP, and now on FM at 93.3. Two stories that stick out to me today, and one of them is the story in Mesquite with Mesquite police officers going into the school on Monday morning at about 9 o'clock on the report of a student with a gun. Police go in to try to de-escalate it and get the student to drop the gun. In the end, what we know is shots were fired. We found out yesterday 19 shots were fired. We find out today all the shots fired by the police department, none from the student. My name's Jeff. It's Westside Jeff. And I'm in for Chris Crock here on News Talk 820 WBAP. I have a real problem with the lack of visibility. We do not trust our institutions. And that pisses me off. It should piss you off because everything's being questioned. Our country is questioning political leaders. In Washington, our citizens are questioning law enforcement. That makes me mad. Our citizens are questioning parenthood. Our citizens are questioning religion. Our citizens are questioning religious leaders. Everywhere you turn, when you hear something, you're saying, oh, it's a political angle. I got a problem with the lack of visibility here because they're tripping over their own unit, if you know what I mean. It's not that hard for the police department to come out and share the police accounts of the report of what occurred Monday morning that would clear a lot of things up. What I want to know is what happened in that school that made officers pull their guns and shoot this kid. Did the kid point the gun at him? Okay, I'm good with that. But we find out today the kid never even pulled the trigger. My problem with this all comes back to one thing. The lack of visibility reinforces the problem in this country, in our community, right here in Dallas, that we don't trust anything. We don't trust what we see. We don't trust what we hear. We don't trust what we're being told. We need to regain trust. The second topic I'm following today is the story out of Alabama. In the state of Alabama today, the state Supreme Court, so state Supreme Court, not the U.S. federal Supreme Court, the state Supreme Court today, it came out that the major Alabama health system there in Alabama is suspending in vitro fertilization treatments days after the state Supreme Court said frozen embryos qualify as children under the state law. So there was a lawsuit from a few folks against the healthcare system. It's University of Alabama at Birmingham, their health system, because what happened was a patient dropped some frozen embryos and they were ruined. So the owners of those embryos, the couples, sued the University of Alabama at Birmingham. The lower court made a decision that went to the state Supreme Court. State Supreme Court ruled embryos are considered children. Now, here's my take on this. Abortion, when I start talking abortion, the phones I know light up. Garrett is my producer tonight, and he tells me he's getting some calls. I get it. I understand it. I got to give you my opinion. My opinion is this, that the issue of abortion is alive and well across this country. My opinion is abortion is and will continue to be a very hot potato in 2024, now through the election and beyond. This issue is not going to get solved this week, this month, this year. It's going to resonate across this country for a couple years. And when the U.S. Supreme Court struck down Roe v. Wade last year, that sent the issue back to each state and for each state to decide how they want to treat abortion. Not the state legislature, not the state government, because again, we don't trust them. It should come back to you and me. The Supreme Court said we want the citizens of the state, we want the citizens of Texas to determine how they want to proceed on abortion. Do you want to approve, not approve? To me, it's not a black and white issue, and I'll tell you why in 3 minutes. It's more than a black and white issue. Don't sit there and tell me it's black and white. I'll explain it in 3 minutes. See, abortion, it's a tough topic. It's a tough political topic to wrap your head around. It's very difficult to get your head wrapped around it. Because the question that comes up is, when does life begin? Does life begin with embryos? The state Supreme Court of Alabama decision today, that ruling suggests it does. I don't think so. It's not my opinion, but the Supreme Court said it, and we have to live with it, at least if you live in Alabama. Here's my thought on it not being a black and white issue. If I put 1,000 of you in one room right now, random people, I just pick 1,000 people listening to my voice right now, put you in one room. Of all generations, different ages, different genders, different races, different backgrounds, different people. Put 1,000 people in a room, and I start asking key questions. The room will wildly vary. So let me ask, individually, answer the question for me. Are you so hell-bent against abortion under all circumstances that under all circumstances you say, no, we should never have abortion, period, end of discussion, that's the end of it? No conditions. Abortion, illegal, period. That percentage is very, very, very small. Very small. There's a lot of people, I would say the majority of people, meaning over 50% of this country, would agree that abortion is necessary when it saves the life of the mother or in the case of rape and incest. Yeah, some of you will call and tell me I'm an idiot because of what I just said. Yeah, I can find one or two or three or five of you. But again, the majority of this country believes that abortion should be accessible when it saves the life of the mother, when it's rape, and when it's incest. But let me ask you this question. Here's what it really comes down to me. I told you to tell you in 3 minutes. Let me ask you this. Are you in favor of abortion? I want your gut check. I want you to think of this. I want your gut check. Your belief system. This comes back to your core belief system. Are you in favor of abortion at 4 weeks of pregnancy? When a mother's at 4 weeks, are you okay with the concept of abortion? I think a lot of folks would say yes. If you're not hell-bent against abortion, I think people go 4 weeks, yes. What about 8 weeks of pregnancy? What about 12 weeks of pregnancy? What about 15? When a mother's at 15 weeks, would you be in favor of an abortion? Would you be in favor of allowing abortions? What about 18 weeks? How about 21? 24? 29? You see, the higher I go, the number of weeks I add on to this, the more weeks we go, the more you pause because you struggle to come to terms with your level of acceptance of abortion on where it's okay and where it's not okay. Again, I'm not talking to those of you who are hell-bent against abortion under all circumstances. I'm not talking about those of you that are pro-abortion under all circumstances. I think the majority of Americans are somewhere in the middle here. I think the majority of people feel there are cases and scenarios where abortion's okay. But the more weeks you add on, the closer you get to the term of the birth of the baby, the more you get uncomfortable and go, I don't know. Yeah, you squirm. You don't know. My stance is pretty simple. Like it or love it. Whether you hate me or you love me. Common sense. I'm a good conservative. And as a good conservative, I say get the government out of my life. And my stance is this. Abortion, in my opinion, is something that should be left between the mother, the father, and we never talk about that. It's always the mother. It's up to the father too, because it takes two. The doctor and your Lord. And if all of you are okay with it, then so be it. I don't want the government telling me yes, no, or indifferent. That's my attitude. That's my stance. You can argue all day long with me, but the reality is I think the majority of Americans are somewhere in the middle. But Alabama State Supreme Court today made a ruling, or it came out and as a ruling, that embryos are a child. And Nikki Haley went all in on it by making a comment when she said on the campaign trail today, she sides with the Alabama Supreme Court on IVF ruling that embryos, she said, quote, embryos to me are babies. I don't agree with that. Great topic, something that you're going to have to grapple with for months to come. My name's Jeff. It's Westside Jeff. We'll continue this conversation on the other side of this. If you want to weigh in, 800-288-9227, or hit me up on social media at Westside Jeff. I'm Westside Jeff, and for Chris Crock on News Talk 820 WBAP, and now on FM at 93.3. Westside Jeff, and for Chris Crock on News Talk 820 WBAP. I just apply common sense opinion to current events. I follow the news. I analyze it. I read it. I try to stay in touch with what's going on across our country and right here in North Dallas, North Texas. And I formulate an opinion. And I'm lucky enough to get a chance with the First Amendment to the opportunity for freedom of speech to sit here and give it to you. Sometimes I get a lot of social media messages that say, "Hey Jeff, you're saying you're saying what I'm thinking." Thank God we have somebody like you who's willing to do that and say that and can say it. Thank you, because you give us the clarity of how we feel. Every now and then I get complaints, and that's okay. I've never apologized for my opinion. Following two big stories. One of them, a local story about Mesquite police officers firing 19 shots at in an office at a kid who has a weapon. The kid's injured. We don't know if the kid was shot still to this day, 40, 60 hours later. And we don't know the details. And I say the full visibility the police department has to open up and tell us what the hell happened, because that's why we don't trust our institutions. Speaking of trust in our institutions, major Alabama health system today paused in vitro fertilization treatments after the state Supreme Court says frozen embryos qualify as children. That's a very big, significant ruling. And that's coming our way to Texas, and it's coming the way to California, New York, Illinois, North Dakota, South Dakota, Florida. Pick a state, it's coming. Today, Nikki Haley sides with Alabama Supreme Court on IVF, ruling, she said, quote, embryos to me are babies. It's a hot topic. It's something people care about. It's across my social media feed, and it's something you want to talk about. And that's how you can do it is 800-288-9227, 800-288-WBAP, like Alex from Dallas. Alex, thanks for calling. You're on with Westside Jeff on News Talk 820 WBAP.
Thank you for taking my call, Jeff. Like I told your screener, I'm not very eloquent with words, but I'd like to make a point.
Please do.
Yes, sir. You know how the Democrats, when there's a shooting, they embellish it to suit their means. Having said that, I think there's something more to this, because if a woman embryo is fertile in her body and she goes have an abortion, is she going to be is that going to be homicide because of this? Because it's the same thing. It's an embryo. It's fertile, and it's considered live now with that ruling. So, is she going to be, charged for homicide if she goes have an abortion? I mean, is that what it's leading to?
It's going to lead to those kinds of questions, Alex. That's where we're going to go. And you know what? I'm okay with that. I'm okay with those conversations, and I think they need to be had, because it's up to you, the voter. Alex, it's up to you to go in the polls and vote yes or no based off of a proposition to say this is and this isn't abortion. This is abortion, and we're either in favor of it or not in favor of it, and for the state to uphold it. And it should be different. It's okay for Alabama to treat it one way and California another, and Texas to respond one way and North Dakota another. That's what the Supreme Court in Washington wants, why they send it back to the states.
Well, I'm proud we have good leaders, because that's what it's going to take. The regular layman is this world is upside down right now. I mean, the government is not what it used to be.
I agree with you, Alex. Thank you for calling, and thank you for listening. I appreciate it. I totally agree with you. It comes back to what I said earlier about the Mesquite shooting. The government is not what it used to be, and we see that in institutions of lack of trust and lack of credibility and what institutions are doing. That's exactly my point on both these issues. Exactly.
Yeah, we've got good leaders, and they're in for the fight, just like you are with your radio broadcast.
That's right, and I think it comes back to. Thank you very much for listening, and it comes back to how you and I and the voter feel. It's about the voters. It's not about politicians. It's about voters. That's the key. Sandra from Fort Worth, thanks for calling. You're on News Talk 820 WBAP, and now on FM 93.3.
Okay, thank you for taking my call. A child can't be a child without being an embryo first. So, yes, I believe an embryo in the womb is a baby. I am, however, opposed to artificial insemination. I was pregnant. I'm 77. I was pregnant 5 times, never took home a baby, delivered one that died. At the time, I could have done surrogate pregnancy. I could have done artificial insemination, and I chose not to because I thought something about it was God's will, that I just didn't have any kids. So I think the problem lies in artificial insemination. It isn't in a womb. It's I don't know. I have a problem with that. The only other problem I have with restriction on abortion is that if you have a 10 or 11-year-old girl which gets pregnant by incest, to force her to go through a pregnancy and rip up her body in the process because she's too young to deal with it, and rip up her mental psyche, I think is cruel. And I say that because I was once asked to be a spokesman at a right to life convention, whatever. And they wouldn't allow me to speak because I said that. They dictated what I could say, but I just can't imagine making a young girl like that go through a pregnancy and then give up a baby. And it would be mental anguish. It would be horrible. I speak from the voice of having. This is hard to say, but maybe it's necessary. I had an abortion when I was 14. I did not know it was coming. I was pregnant by my father. And even at 14, I don't believe I was capable of bearing a child and giving it up for adoption. I think
a child giving birth to a child. Sandra, I'm sorry to hear that you had to go through that. I appreciate you listening. I appreciate your call. I've got to hit a top of the hour news break. So thank you for listening and thank you for the call. That epitomizes what I'm talking about. That is, these are decisions to be left in the home, in the family. I'll continue this conversation on the other side of our news. My name's Jeff. It's Westside Jeff, and for Chris Kroc on News Talk 820 WBAP, and now on the FM at 93.3.